perimeter with 1:15 left on this 5-minute major. Puck put in front, Quap the save, rebound loose, backhand,
oh my goodness,
scores, and he shot that one between his legs, did Michkov.
Hat trick. Watch this here, folks. This is unbelievable. Matvei Michkov with the incredibly quick hands. Nice puck work around by the Russians. As number 17, keep your eyes on him here. The puck pops out. It's rolling on him as it comes out here, and he is going to just put it right between his legs.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah. Just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit summitpublicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey.
And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 191, brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com. The Philadelphia Flyers. Yes, it's true. This is not a dream. They did draft Matvei Michkov. We want to talk about it again with one of our tremendous draft pundits. They have been a little bit more active in free agency than some of us thought. So there's definitely that to talk about. And I think there's a lot of buzz about Philadelphia Flyers hockey right now. We're going to get into that. And yes, we were recorded late enough to catch up to the Mark Stahl signing today. So we'll mention that a little bit along the way, no doubt. But let's first bring on the panel. To my left, as usual, Chef B, what's on your mind, my man?
I guess what's on my mind is when can we start the season already and start this process, because it's been very, very fun and entertaining. Dan wrote a great article, and it kind of mirrors what I think. You know, it's okay to be a Flyers fan again, okay to actually like your team and root for your team still. And Dan expressed something in a great article about hope. And I think that's what we're all clinging to now. And now we actually have it with this past draft. So I'm really looking forward for the start of next season.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, at PhillyIsFlyer.com, you can find that fine piece about the hope brought to the Flyers faithful by the drafting of Matvei Michkov by the great Dan Silver.
Yeah, and, you know, it's our guest today is fitting because he's one of the guests we had on before the draft who was sort of talking about how impressive Michkov has been all along and comparing him to Bedard probably more favorably than anyone else that we had on, which has sort of made me go back and look at some stuff. But yeah, I wrote a long article today that I've been meaning to get out there. I finally had some time this morning just about how, you know, not just in hockey, but in life, you know, we need hope, right? I mean, it's what kind of gets us through the day, gets us through the grind of the day. You need hope. You need things to look forward to. And for me, and I think for a lot of Flyers fans, the fact that they took a chance and were able to recruit and draft a potentially generational player gives me a lot of hope and is going to make it a lot easier to go through some of the down years we're going to have the next few seasons, because we know that there could be a guy coming along who, you know, is a guy that no one else in the NHL can score goals like. So it's exciting.
Yeah, it really is. And before we bring on our fantastic guest, the Draft Analyst. Just want to remind everybody that the O&B Puckcast can be followed on Twitter at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck, on our backup plan to avoid the rate limiter on Getter at O&B Puckcast, at O&B Puckcast. Boy, that was something this past weekend. And if you can follow the O&B Puckcast on one of about a dozen platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Amazon Audible, Google. We have a YouTube page, just plug in there, O&B Puckcast. And of course, we have a Facebook page as well. If you could follow or subscribe, whatever is appropriate for your platform, we do appreciate it. It moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcast. If you could give us a 5-star rating, we do appreciate it. It puts the algorithm in our favor as well. We are setting records all over the place. We'd like to thank Matvei Michkov for that as well. And the Phil Flyers management so far anyway. And we do appreciate it. So without any further ado, you can catch him at the draftanalyst.substack.com, also on Twitter at the Draft Analyst. You also know him as Steve Kournianos. Welcome, brother.
Guys, what's going on? Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Fantastic. Hey, you're the guy who could not be more effusive in his praise when you were here last, just a few shows ago, talking about Matvei Michkov and how if the Flyers had the opportunity to draft this guy, we definitely have to go for it. Maybe you could take us back to that night. I know you were doing your own coverage, right? And you saw the draft unfold, and the first little surprise in Anaheim with taking Carlson, maybe over Fantilli. That was a surprise to most people. Maybe go from there and work on down if you could recapture that.
Well, I had the TV on mute for a reason. I just didn't want to hear anything. I just wanted to just look at the kids getting. It was almost like a surprise. I wanted to see the camera pan to the stands and who was going to be standing up to, hug their parents, whatever. So the Carlson thing was a surprise. I was holding out for Michkov going to Anaheim a little bit. I'm like, that would be great, but you can make an argument, right, for Carlson over Fantilli. But I think all of us, you wouldn't be wrong if you ranked Fantilli too, and you had Fantilli going to Anaheim. So naturally, it was too easy for Columbus. Right after that, they're not going to pass on a guy like Fantilli. Then, of course, San Jose. No real surprise there. We kind of thought that they're in need of a dynamic center. Will Smith is the perfect center for them. When it came to Montreal, though, that's when I was talking to the TV, and I was like, "Don't do it, man." I'm like, "Don't do it." I said, "You are given this opportunity right now to just, kind of just add a new chapter." And what I wrote in my write-up, I was doing like a live blog, was that it's one thing to have a good team built around a guy that you pick at 5, but you don't want to be the guy who passed on a potential generational player who goes on to become let's just say Alex Ovechkin or even a Pavel Bure or something along those lines, or Nikita Kucherov. And when the Canadians announced Reinbacher, I'm like, okay, that now the kind of the die's been cast, that the first 2 picks, a little the Fantilli Carlson thing was okay, a little surprising, but now we have a legit a controversy because the Canadians didn't need him. They had plenty of right-hand defensemen at the team. Obviously, none of them like David Reinbacher, but still, he's going to have to fight his way up through. And then you go down to Arizona, and I'm like, oh, they're taking Michkov, and they take Simashev, which nobody predicted. Okay, I had Simashev. I think I had him at 12, and I'm like, oh, I could see him going to the top 10 maybe, but ahead of Michkov, the Russians wouldn't have done that. If the Russians had a KHL draft, they're not taking Simashev over Michkov. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And it would have been the same 2 years ago, and 3 and 4 and 5 years ago when the kids were 12 or 13. So when it came down to Philly, I'm like, oh, come on, man. Don't do it. Don't be like everybody else. Have some guts. And when they announced it, I'm like, great. He's in the freaking Rangers division. He's in the Rangers division. But I was really happy that, he did go to a team that wanted him. He went to a team that kind of needed that presence, right? Because you go back through all the great Flyers in the past. There's been a little bit of a lull, right? Since maybe Claude Giroux. We haven't had that all-star heart caliber guy, unless I'm missing someone else. I'm forgetting somebody. Since Claude Giroux, that maybe, but this guy is on another level because Giroux was a late first-round pick. We knew he was talented, but we didn't no one ever said that guy's going to be the Flyers Hall of Famer and be the team leader, etc. We were like, all right, he's a nice kid, he could score. With Michkov, though, you are in the, and my example that I used was Forsberg, because Forsberg was, when he was drafted, the talk was, hey, this kid is really good. He's really freaking good. And everyone's talking about Lindros, Anita Byron, Pat Falloon, but this Forsberg kid, and remember the stories about Jay Greenberg wrote about, and everybody at the time, how the Flyers did not want to part with him. But the reason why I mentioned Forsberg more than anything else was it took him 3 full years of developing in Sweden until he arrived in the NHL. 3 full seasons in the SHL. In that 3-year period, he was destroying every tournament you could think of. He was lighting up. So, and the Quebec Nordiques were already established at the time as a up-and-coming team because of the Lindros trade. So now you're adding this piece. And in a way, as a Flyers fan, you could envision that. You could see the Flyers in 26, 27, or whatever year it is to be a playoff caliber team, a bubble team, maybe even 45, 50 wins, who knows? And now you're going to add a potential 40-goal scorer. Now, I remember Bure arriving in Vancouver. Vancouver was nothing before he showed up. And it was, I think it was 2 years post-draft. But it's like Kaprizov too. Like, these guys are going to be ready. They're going to show up. There's no reason to send them to the AHL. There's no reason. They're going to show up to camp. Michkov is going to show up to camp. The Flyers by that point should have an idea of who that we've drafted in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years, first and second rounders. Who's going to be our core, right? Is it going to be Forster? Is Bobby Brink going to be there? Is Frost still going to be around? Tippett, etc. But now you have this like almost like a final piece. And that's what I've been saying all along is like, who cares about the contract? Like, this is a long-term thing. This is like could be a 10 to 12 to 15-year run that Michkov could have in Philadelphia or any team who drafts him. So right off the bat, I'm like, I mean, like they won the first round. Like they got the second best player in the draft. All the other stuff that knocked him down had nothing to do with what goes on the ice. It had everything to do with his character, and his father was murdered, and his contract, and he's stubborn. Who cares? Who cares? The kid is the second best player in the draft, hands down. There was no comparison. I don't care what position he plays, and the Flyers ended up getting him at 7.
Yeah, Jay.
Well, I mean, a couple of things. So one of the things I had in my article today, just to back what Steve was saying, was I looked into the 18-year-old KHL seasons of some Russian guys who became NHL superstars. So Michkov is an 18-year-old in the KHL, which is the second best league in the world. He had 30 games, 20 points, so he had 0.67 points per game. Alex Ovechkin is an 18-year-old, 53 games, 24 points, 0.45 points per game. So Michkov's averaging 0.2 more points per game as an 18-year-old in the KHL. Malkin was at 0.35 points per game. Kirill Kaprizov was at 0.26. Nikita Kucherov only played 9 games in the KHL as an 18-year-old, 0.22 points per game. Artemi Panarin only had 5 games as an 18-year-old in the KHL. Obviously, different guys develop at different ratios. And one of my Rangers fans who, when I pointed the stat out to him, said, hey, look up Sharaponov, who was the guy the Russians drafted, or the Rangers drafted at number 17 a number of years ago. And he had that terrible, he ended up dying, I think, on the bench in a game. He was actually ahead of all of these guys in production as an 18-year-old. So you just don't really know. But Michkov, comparatively to some of these guys, it's unbelievable. And kind of what I wanted to convey to Steve was one of the reasons we're so excited about it, and I was so excited about it, is we're used to guys wanting to go play in New York or wanting to go play in Florida or Vegas. Adam Fox, basically forced his way to the Rangers. Artemi Panarin wanted to play with the Rangers. There was all this mystery surrounding Michkov and who he was, and I think a lot of that kind of knocked him down. And for me, I didn't know anything about him personally, couldn't recognize him off the street. And then when they draft him and you start hearing these things about how the Flyers secretly flew him in to meet with them the Friday before the draft, and he met Keith Jones and his family met Keith Jones and they met Danny Briere and they got along so well. And both Michkov and Briere said there was just a comfort level there. And then you hear Michkov talk about how excited he is to be a Philadelphia Flyer and he wants to win a Stanley Cup in Philadelphia. and you hear him say, he's emotional and he's talking about how his dad's wish for him was to go win the Stanley Cup. Like, when you see all that and you see a guy that like picked Philadelphia, like he wanted to play in Philadelphia, all of that just, I think it makes us feel so good about the situation, right? And it's going to make waiting so much better. But to have this potential generational talent who really wanted to play here and seems like a great kid, I think for me, that's what makes part of it so special.
Yep. Yeah. Steve, I know you covered a lot of it on our prior episode, but just a brief synopsis of what's special and different about his game that puts him in that is reminiscent of a Kaprizov or a Bore or a Malkin or in that ilk.
Just the way he finishes, the way he knows how to get open. It's if you kind of like black out or blur out the entire screen, except for, let's say, like a 10 meter, like a circle with like a 10 meter, 15 meter radius around Michkov, you'll see how he's always open. He always stays in motion, but it's just like the hockey sense is very high. I never understood any criticism that his hockey sense wasn't high. It blew me away. It's like saying, you can't score goals without having hockey sense. All right. Even Phil Esposito, when he was just tapping pucks into the side of the net, you still have to be open. Your stick has to be ready. You have to have hand-eye coordination. So Michkov's ability to finish is unparalleled, was unparalleled in this draft class, and that includes Bedard. Forget about the lacrosse goals. But this guy is money from anywhere. He's money, like, especially once you get him down in the middle, but also like down near the goal line, you can't sleep on him. And what compounds everything is the playmaking and the vision. So he's not just a goal scorer. He's a complete offensive package. And yes, he's not big, but he's also incredibly shifty, and he's a strong, he's got a strong low center of gravity. So he could stick handle his way. And you'll see, if you watch like enough film on him in Russia, and you guys will have to watch him because he's fun to watch. It's just to keep tabs on him. You'll see like how he passes the puck to teammates in motion, how it's not like your typical, I'm going to look at you, I'm going to pass it. There's all types of deception and touch and timing in it. So again, like, what's going to blow me away, and I think what's going to blow the Flyers away, is when this kid is in camp with them and he's doing things that no one on the team can do. And that includes the most experienced NHL players. That what Michkov has been doing, he's been doing this since he was like 13, 14 years old. The way that he scores goals. And again, the lacrosse goals are great. He was the king of the lacrosse goal. He was doing it sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a game, not scoring, but trying it. And the fact that he was doing it at tournaments against elite competition, again, he's just an elite goal scorer. There's no other way. He's an elite, once-in-a-lifetime goal scorer, and 6 teams passed up on that for God knows why.
It's like those words are just magic to the ears. What else can I say?
But we all knew that, though. We all knew that. Like, again, and I hate to do this, but if Michkov were, let's say, from Boston, or if he were from Minnesota, or he was from Canada, would his character, would his like the deep secrets of his life, or would he have been nitpicked as much as he had been because he's Russian? And that's a fair question to ask, because Adam Fantilli's not perfect. Connor Bedard had made a lot of mistakes in his playoff series. Nobody talked about it, but you don't care about that because it's Connor Bedard. I felt that Michkov had done enough, especially after he tore up the KHL. That should have been like, all right, guys, we've been tough on the kid. Let's really celebrate this unique talent, and let's go back to the 2021 days where we really were making this a Bedard versus Michkov draft. For whatever reason, people decided to turn it into a Fantilli-Bedard draft. And remember, before the World Juniors, they even said, could Fantilli overtake Bedard? I mean, that was ridiculous. So, again, like, Michkov has a lot to prove, of course. We still have to wait. But the elite, finishing ability, just his presence, you'll see. That the team's going to realize it. And unfortunately for the rest of the league, they're going to realize it too. And I'm going to take that to my grave. He's a goal scorer. So even if he does nothing for an entire game, like a Mike Bossy or a Yari Curry or a Phil Esposito or a Mike Gartner or Brett Hull, where all they're doing is scoring goals, who cares what goes on everywhere else? You know what I mean?
I got you. He's a machine. We look forward to the machine.
Tim Kerr, right? Were people complaining about Tim Kerr's defense and when he was scoring 50 goals? You couldn't move him from in front of the net.
No, there was a machine, another machine, different kind. Yeah. I mean, just different.
But that's what I'm saying. Like a goal scorer scores goals, and no one did it better than Michkov, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. But the Flyers weren't done in the first round, 22 overall. They get Oliver Bonk, and want to get your feedback on that, and based on some of your scouting.
All right. So the first thing I thought of when they took Bonk was Reinbacher the pick, and would Reinbacher have gone, because the Flyers definitely did need a right shot defenseman. They were pretty good on the left side, but they definitely needed a presence like prospect pool wise. So I know they acquired Helga Granz. But after like Ronnie Addard and Wyatt Wiley, like maybe Ethan Sampson, they really don't have a whole lot. So I was thinking like, okay, so they just drafted Oliver Bonk. Was Reinbacher the pick? Of course, we'll never know, but who cares? As far as the pick itself, I think it was a need pick, but it was a good need pick because Bonk is a very mature young man. I mean, he was he was on a pairing in London where you could say they were the second pairing. But as the season progressed, you could tell that Dale Hunter, their coach, was leaning on Bonk's pairing to tackle all the top line matchups. So he's a pretty good skater. He's not like blazing speed, but he's got a very hard, accurate shot. He if you piss him off, he'll really push back. He'll get feisty. He doesn't back down. So when you have the size combination, the IQ, the NHL bloodlines, the way he could run a power play, which is more in a clean, controlled, like more of like a Nick Lidstrom kind of way, where he's not like dynamic and saucering passes, and he's just doing everything right. He has a high panic threshold, so automatically he becomes the Flyers' top defense prospect definitely on the right side, and you can make a case that he's the best defense prospect they have in the whole pool right now.
Chef,
he's been described as a big shutdown defenseman. I'm guessing his size is pretty good. He'll probably put on a little bit more muscle mass, but is stereotyping him into or fitting him into that shutdown defenseman mold. Is that fair? I mean, from what I've read, he can do a lot of other stuff too, right?
Yeah. If Logan Mailloux, the first round pick of the Canadiens, had 2 years experience on him, if he wasn't there in London, Bonk would have been, a 25 to 27 minute a night guy. I think he already was around like 22 or 23 minutes. But a lot of it, if you want to look at zone starts and sheltering, like the Isaiah George Mailloux pairing was definitely not as reliable on the defensive end than the Jackson Edward Bonk pairing. So it's easy to just say like, oh well, he's a defensive defenseman because he's always being matched up against the other team's top lines. But no, like you said, he could do a lot more. He's a very good outlet passer. Out of all the things he does offensively, besides how cleanly he handles the puck and how you pass it to him, no matter how hard it is, he'll still settle it in one touch. It's gone. Is his shot. Like it's a low, hard, accurate shot. He'll wait. He knows how to wait for the lane to open up. So I had him ranked 37, but again, I was pro forward in this draft. So I never considered it like an off the board pick at all. Like I was mocking him around this range pretty much since March. So the pick not only made sense, it addresses a need, and you get a guy who could he's a two-way type. He's a quintessential two-way defenseman. He's not offensive minded. He's not defensive minded. He's the complete definition of a two-way defenseman who could shut down on one end and run the offense on the other end. I don't know what we'll see more of, but again, like if you look at who he's competing with, do the Flyers really have, like if they drafted Sandy Palik, I'd say, all right, there's their power play quarterback right there. They have Cam York, they have Emil Andrea, but I could see Bonk being no worse than a middle pairing guy who logs 20 plus minutes, and he's going to want to be on the power play. So it's going to be a competition, but I think next year, if he should go back to London next year. Mailloux should graduate by then. You'll see a huge explosion, I think, point-wise. You'll see him go from like 40 or 45 points to like 65, 70, 75 points. And then there goes that whole, defensive defenseman or shutdown type thing. He's a two-way type.
Gotcha. So the Flyers did not have a second-round pick. until the draft itself, and they traded their pick that they had picked up from the Provorov deal. Was actually an LA pick, and pick number 167 to get Carson Bjornsson, a goaltender from the Brandon Wheat Kings. What's your impressions?
Okay, so Bjornsson, first of all, you have to look at what happened. The goalie shoe dropped like early. Chicago took, I think, Guy in the early 30s, well, mid to late 30s. So then we saw Augustine go. We saw Rabel go, then Augustine. So I don't know if another goalie went before him. He might have been the fourth goalie. This kid was the top North American goalie on Central Scouting's rankings, I think, the whole year. He was given an A grade on the watch list. So he was always a highly coveted goalie, considered to be one of the best goalies in the draft, if not the best. So everything was going just fine until it was around like March, maybe like mid to late March, where he just couldn't stop anything. And it was a small sample. It was only about 7 to 8 games. Brandon was not necessarily making the playoffs, but like he just wasn't playing well. He was getting beat from distance a lot. And so I was like, well, it was just going to hurt his stock, because this is a little like, this is kind of a suboptimal stretch he's going through. And then he goes to the U18 Worlds, and in his first game, he gets annihilated by Sweden. And it's the same thing. He's letting in bad goals. So the one thing I liked about him, though, was that he was the number one in Brandon. Not easy to do when you're a bubble team or a mediocre team, kind of like the outside looking in. And he was able to shoulder that load and deliver like really good 3/4 of a season. So that happens to goalies sometimes. They're young. As far as like, trading that pick to get him, again, I don't have a problem with it, because they needed to draft a goalie number one. It was a deep goalie draft, and you can make the argument that even at 51, that Bjornsson was the best player, quote unquote, available. I had him ranked, I think, like 79, and that was a late season dip. He would have been around the 40s or 50s if he just was able to maintain his consistency. But he had, again, this is like maybe a 12 to 15 game sample if you include the U18 Worlds, so a tournament sample and a league sample. And it's like, okay, but it's the end of the season, so he could go fix it. He's going to meet all the Flyers goalie consultants. They're going to work on things with him. But you definitely cannot deny that with the size, he doesn't flinch. He was outstanding against high-powered offenses in the WHL before the end of the season. So you definitely have a potential number one there. Just keep an eye on the goals from distance for next season, see if he makes any improvements or adjustments.
Gotcha. Dan?
Yeah, just quickly on them, because when this happened in real time, a bunch of Flyers fans were kind of tweeting out, oh, guess that means Carter Hart's going to be gone. Of course, there have been rumors that the Flyers might be looking to trade Hart, which may or may not, in fact, be true. I've definitely heard some of that stuff as well. But this, make no mistake, them drafting goalies this year, and they took another goalie in the third round, doesn't have any impact whatsoever on Carter Hart. The Flyers didn't draft a goalie in 2022, and they didn't draft a goalie in 2020. Typically, you want to draft at least a goalie every year. So they really needed to replenish their goalie prospects at the ages of 17, 18, 19. Flyers fans look at it and they say, oh, we've got Felix Sandstrom, we've got Samuel Ersson, we've got Alexei Kolosov over in Russia. Ersson and Kolosov specifically are really good goalie prospects, right? But you want to keep backfilling because you just never know what's going to happen. Ersson could get injured. Kolosov might not come over from Russia. So you just want to really keep the goalie stockpile replenished, especially when you're entering into a longer style rebuild. So, these are the goalies, and I don't pretend to know goalie prospects. I know that the main, pundits I would listen to, and Steve included, had Bjornsson further down than some of the other goalies that went. But there were some, folks that had him as the highest rated goalie in the draft. So who really knows? But clearly the Flyers felt like they needed to stock up on young goalies. And they thought that with the goalie run that Steve was talking about, that if they didn't move up into that second round, that they were going to miss on Bjornsson. And clearly he's the guy that they wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. Ship.
Since we're talking about the goalie specific, and I know I'll probably piggyback with the other one they picked as well, but I'm just curious. Now, do you figure Dan, and I guess this could be both for Dan or Steve. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so they got Cal Peterson back in a trade. Are they comfortable? But when you think about it, what's more feasible going into the season? Is it going to be Sandstrom as the backup? Is Cal Peterson just somebody that they can just waive because they know that nobody's going to pick up him because there's what he's making $5 million? Yeah. Okay. So is that just something? Is that just? I know it was a move to get the trade done, but is that going to be a paper move we're going to see from this team, you think, because of the goalie situation?
The interesting thing with Peterson is that, as you mentioned, they took him and Sean Walker back in that trade with the Kings, and it was a pure salary cap dump on the part of the Kings. I mean, the only reason we got those guys was because they wanted to get rid of that salary, and we got a draft pick in return. But what I'd heard was that Cal Peterson's agent was told by the Flyers that he was going to get a very fair shake in training camp. And this was around the same time that there were a lot of rumors about Carter Hart being traded. Now, is Hart going to get moved before the season starts? I don't know. But I do think that the Flyers told Peterson's group that he was going to get a fair shake in camp and that there was a very real possibility he would start the season with the Flyers. So I still think there are some things that are going to happen before the season starts. I don't know if it's going to be Hart getting moved or trying to move Sandstrom, but we know that John Tortorella loves Samuel Ersson, and maybe he starts the season in the AHL. Right now, I guess it's a favorite to start the season in the AHL based on the roster right now. But I think Ersson's probably a better NHL goalie right now than either Peterson or Felix Sandstrom. It's just going to get a little bit tricky and complicated. But again, the fact that they're in a rebuild, look, again, like I'm hoping that we're going to have a top 3 pick next year. And if, playing Cal Peterson helps us towards that goal, it's fine with me. I think there's more dominoes that are going to fall before the season starts, but I guess we'll have to find out.
Yeah. Steve, what's your impression with Ersson, the way he's come along? Just a quick aside.
Well, I mean, he wasn't a high round pick, and then he goes to Lehigh Valley and he kills it. So that's what you wanted. I always thought it was going to be Sandstrom. He was the guy that I think he was like a 2015 pick, maybe. I forgot what he was drafted, but I always thought that Sandstrom was the guy that, because remember the Hextall era, they were drafting, it seemed like 2-3 goalies a draft, right? I think 2015 in particular, they had Tomek and some of these other guys, Fedotov, right? But unfortunately, so I always viewed Ersson. I'm like, let me see what Ersson did, because he was good. I think he played for Brynäs in the SHL, if I recall correctly. He was good in the Swedish league. So then when he comes over to North America, he goes to Lehigh Valley and he basically becomes like the best goalie down there. I don't know. I didn't see how often he played this year, if he was called up at all,
he played 12 games up for the Flyers at 42 with Lehigh Valley. Yeah.
He was very good in the NHL this year.
Yeah. So obviously we've seen these goalies. You can't get too excited about a small sample. You want to see them, 30, 40 games, and then like, okay, now we can really have something to build on. But again, I it's just one of those situations where we thought Carter Hart was the untouchable, that he was the franchise, and that Ersson or Sandstrom would be the backup. But once Carter Hart has had his ups and downs, now you're stuck with all right, well, who can we lean on? And it's just around the same time, like I said, Ersson came over. He did well in the AHL. And now you unfortunately, the Fedotov thing, he was a really good prospect too, until the whole the thing with the Russian, whatever happened to the poor guy.
Did you see, not to interrupt, did you see what happened with that today with Fedotov?
Is he free?
So
is he a free human being? I mean,
so this is really interesting with Fedotov, what's going on. And Isaiah, I don't know if it's okay if I just kind of take a minute or two and talk about this. But so the Flyers signed Fedotov before last season to a 1-year contract.
Yep.
And before he could come over, he was basically like arrested in Russia and sent to Siberia to do his military duty. Now, a couple months ago, it was announced that his military duty was completed. The Flyers came out and said his contract is still valid for this coming season. Basically they call it, I think, tolling a contract, TOLLING. That's a legal term where if a contract is signed, but then for whatever reason it can't start, it gets delayed and put into place later. So the Flyers are saying his contract is still valid for this season. Meanwhile, comes out that Fedotov has signed a deal apparently to play, because he's a free man now. He's signed a contract to play with CSKA in the KHL. However, this morning, a report came out that the KHL is saying that they are not going to, at the moment, they're not going to authorize and approve Fedotov's contract with this team in the KHL, because the KHL is recognizing that he has a contract in place with the Flyers. We don't know what the player wants, but most people are thinking this has more to do with Michkov than with Fedotov, because the KHL is saying, hey, he has a contract with the Flyers. We don't want to get involved with this. Whereas with Michkov, I think the KHL is obviously hoping that the Flyers are not going to try and put any pressure on, St. Petersburg and or Michkov to get out of that contract. So it's a really interesting situation. I think it's going to come down to what Fedotov wants. But clearly, if Fedotov wants to come over to the U.S., the KHL is saying that's fine. He may want to play with CSKA, or there may be other factors at play where he feels pressure to play for them. But I think it's going to come down to what Fedotov wants. And there's a very real possibility he could be in the NHL this year.
Yeah. I felt that he was NHL when he signed. He had just won the KHL championship in 7 games. Like, he was phenomenal. He had a great run. And I was thinking about putting him in the same category as Sorokin and Shesterkin, as Samsonov, because of the fact that they went through the same thing. Like, before they came to the NHL, they had very successful playoff runs in the KHL, and that once Fedotov basically was the best goalie in the KHL playoffs, I'm like, well, he's going to show up to Flyers camp. And remember, this is after a really bad season in Philly. He's going to show. I don't think the intent is to go to the ECHL. Like, he's going to want to make the NHL, and there was an opening, and that's why the whole thing hit hard. Is because we're like, oh, this sucks, because I thought he would have. Made it more competitive for see who gets the jobs for the Flyers going into that season. So now let's just say that is true, and let's say he's free, he's available. Now you're looking at Urson, you're looking at Fedotov. Obviously, I don't know what kind of condition he's in. You have Kolosov in the pipeline. You just drafted 2 really good goalies. So maybe not this year. Maybe the goal is to tank and let Peterson be cannon fodder, and who cares? But right now, that the goalie situation, who would have thunk it? It's actually better now than it was on the Hextall, and he was the goddamn goalie.
Good figure.
It's also he tweeted out a picture of him by a swimming pool in Dubai somewhere, with shirtless, flexing, and so. Who knows? He ain't in Russia now, and who knows if he'll go back, because the last time he was there, they put him in a camp in Siberia. I guess if I was in Siberia, I want to be poolside somewhere warm too. So
yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
Right, so wait, you're saying Fedotov was in Dubai?
Yeah, Fedotov posted on his Instagram account a photo of him having a drink on a balcony in Dubai. This was a couple days ago, and then all this stuff came out about him signing with the KHL, but then the KHL saying that they're honoring his contract with the Flyers. So I don't know what's going to happen. I will say that I heard from a source a month ago that the Flyers were very confident that Fedotov was going to be with them for this coming season. But wow, I think it's going to come down to what he wants to do. Sounds like to me. I wonder if the Flyers strategically would say, hey, you know what? Don't worry about the contract we have with Fedotov. He can play there, just setting it up for kind of a similar type of thing with Michkov. It's
maybe a chess game now, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, but what can you tell us about Igor Zavragin, if I didn't murder that name?
No. All right. That's actually kind of funny with Zavragin. When I was doing my top 32 for this year's draft in May and June of last year, I'm like, you know what? It looks like it's a pretty deep goalie draft. I want to sneak a goalie in. And so I went and I was researching all the stats, and I was going through all these the playoff rosters. And so this Zavragin kid popped up. Now, remember, the Russians didn't have any U18 involvement in tournaments because of the ban, the IIHF ban. So, but what I came across was an article in Russian that I had to translate that Tretiak, the Hall of Famer Tretiak, was basically saying that Zavragin is like almost like Askarov, like he's going to be the next great Russian goalie. And he played for a team called Mamonti Ugry. They're pretty good, a competitive team, a junior team. They're known for their offense. But he was their goalie, and in his draft -1 season, he had a really good year, like a half season. So I put him as my number 32 pick. I was like, I'm going to get a goalie in there. Let me just sneak him in there, get his name out there here in North America, see what I'm sure people knew about him, but I didn't see him like really ranked anywhere or whatever. So he has a terrible start to the season. So I'm like, oh man, what a stupid move that was on my part by ranking this kid top 32. But then he bounces back, and he and the other goalie that got drafted, someone drafted his partner. They basically went back and forth. Even the playoffs, it wasn't even like a merit-based situation. They would like one guy would start, the other guy got the next start, and they would alternate regardless of win or lose. But what I like about him the most is that he gobbles up everything. There's no rebound issues with him. When he gets beat, it's usually like it takes a snipe or there's chaos in front of the net, and it had little to do with him. So he didn't have like a super dominant season. Usually goalies of his, like, let's say, pedigree should have been in the KHL for a little bit of the VHL, and I don't think he was. But I had him ranked, like I said, what I rank? I knocked him down to 116, right? I had him down at 116, but he's a goalie, and so like I put him, like lumped him in with all those other goalies. So I love the pick. When I saw that in Nez, I'm like, oh yeah, my guy. All right, there he is. You got arguably the best Russian goalie from a pretty good group. Like the 05-year group was pretty good for Russian goalies. And Zavragin, listen, if Tretiak is saying this kid's going to be a good player, you got to take his word for it. So we'll see how it comes along. I don't know if he's going to be full MHL next season or go to the VHL. I mean, he'll be old enough and experienced enough. But he was good in the playoffs. His team didn't advance as deep as they expected to, but he was pretty good, better than the other guy who got drafted. So, but again, like you got two of my top, let's say, 10 goalies and back to back. It looked to me like it was strategic, though. It looked to me like this was really beginning with the Bonk pick. It seems to me that, all right, we got to address right D. We have to address goaltending now. And I agree with that. I know a lot of goalies, you draft them in rounds 5 or 6, 7, they become Hall of Famers. I get it. But for this particular draft, there was a little bit of a drop-off where there's more risk involved with some of the overage guys. So I like what they did. They got the best North American goalie, one of the best at least, and one of the best, or the best Russian goalie. And that's it. Now we wait.
Excellent. But later on in that third round, 95th overall, Denver Barkey is taken from the London Knights. That's a good program, just like Bonk. He's Bonk's teammate, right? So he's a smaller guy, something the Flyers had maybe been hesitant to do, except for maybe Bobby Brink a couple of years ago. What can you tell us about him?
He's all energy. I remember Travis Konechny in his draft year playing for the 67s, and he was definitely more, let's say, like hardcore physical, and he was always getting hurt. But with Konechny, the thing with him in his draft year was really the effort. Like this kid does not stop working, and he's involved in physical play and etc. So Barkey is kind of like fits that mold. The thing is, London this year, much like their defense group, like they didn't have like that superstar player. Like when London is usually like dominant, they'll have like a Mitch Marner or they'll have a like a Matt Tkachuk. This year's group was more like it was well balanced, a lot of young kids on it. And Barkey has an 05 and Easton Cowan, who was a Toronto first round pick this year. They're like kind of smaller guys, good reputations, high OHL priority picks. They by the end of the season, they were on the top line. And the center was the Seattle kid draft pick Winterton, and they were basically dominating the OHL playoffs. They're averaging over a point a game. There were the chemistry was ridiculous. And so it's like, well, wait a minute. So here we have London on the cusp of going to a Memorial Cup, winning an OHL championship, and their top line has two smaller first-year eligible guys. I had Cowan and Barkey right next to each other in the late second round. I'm very surprised. One of my shocks in the draft was that Cowan went 28 and Barkey went like whatever it was, 90 something. I mean, it wasn't that much of a difference between the two. Maybe there's they like the fact that Cowan's a little bit taller, but listen, he's energetic, he's quick, he can make plays at top speed, he could be on the power play, he could kill penalties. He's played for Team Canada at U18 events before, so he'll probably be at least at a minimum invited to the U20 World Junior Camp. So again, a kid that I liked a lot. I had him ranked at one point in the first round in March, and I realized I'm being a little bit too bullish on him. But I don't think he has like any limitations outside of size. So I like the pick.
He's obviously aside from Michkov, but Barkey was my favorite pick that the Flyers made. And this is not, I'm going to be honest, I had literally, I don't do the multiple rounds of research like Steve does. This is his profession. I just kind of do it, for fun a little bit. But after I started looking into Barkey, when I heard his post-draft interview, he just came across as very smart, very energetic, just seemed like a really good kid. And then I started watching highlights, and he gets fired up. He's firing up the crowd. It looks like he's got a motor that just never stops.
Yeah.
He looks like a kid who, if he hits, like maybe there's a chance that, his size is going to prevent him from becoming an NHL player. But it looks to me like if he hits, he has a chance to become a very good NHL player. He compared himself to Braden Point in his post-draft interview. And, that's what he's saying as a stylistic way. So for me, that was an exciting pick. I'm going to be excited to see how him and Bonk develop, because the Hunter family does a really good job developing young players through that London program in the OHL. So it's exciting that Bonk's going to be there with Barkey. So, a lot of this is about having fun and hope with some of these young kids. And Barkey was an exciting one for me.
Yep.
Absolutely. In the fourth round, the Flyers chose someone who's got a last name we're very familiar with. It's the son of Mike Knuble, Cole Knuble. And he's an overager, but he improved enough that the Flyers took him 103rd overall. What's your observations?
He should have been drafted last year. I don't know how the hell why teams let him go. He does everything right. He's a leader. He's obviously got the bloodlines. Mike Knuble, I think, wasn't Knuble and Briere line mates?
Yes.
Yeah. So like there's obviously familiarity there.
Yeah.
But to me, it's more like, the USHL is not an easy league to score in for a variety of reasons. The biggest one being the goalies. The quality goalies usually want to go the college route for whatever reason. I can't explain it, but they do. They like to just go to the USHL or Canadian Junior A or the NAHL and just to maintain their eligibility. So because of that, your scoring isn't easy. And he's been a productive player each of his 2 seasons. This year, he was one of the top scorers in the league. And with him, so he's kind of like an awkward skater. I don't know why people want to knock him for it, because he's got like pretty decent size. He's more like a strong upper body. So he'll take hits, but really for me, it's the playmaking and the vision. He's a very talented kid. He could run his own line. He could run a power play from the half wall, puts the right touch on passes, scores clutch goals. So again, that I like when my teams draft kids who are like the best player on their team. Like if you have a chance, when people always say best player available, I think that the definition is like everyone has their own definition of it. What I always consider to be is like, out of all the players available, who were the best players, let's say, if you add the context of like their team, the playoffs, the stats, like everything, like who had the best season? Was it with he's a prize, we project him as this, or he needed a little help here? Like, no. The guys that wire to wire gave you the same effort every night. They produced at the same clip every night. They showed up big in the playoffs, and that's the kind of play that Knuble is. So I think he's going to Notre Dame.
Yes.
I think he's going to Notre Dame. So they have a pretty good recruiting class coming in. They're trying to fix that program and get it back to like where it was a couple of years ago. So again, another good pick. Another, like, if you're going to draft an overager, that's the kind of overager you draft. Literally one of the best kids in the league he was playing in.
Excellent. Later in the fourth round, they take a winger, a center left winger, Alex Chernik from Slovakia, but I think he played in a Swedish league, if I have this right.
Yeah, so he not only did he play in the Swedish league, he kept on getting promoted to the Allsvenskan, which is the adult league. So he never played a full season there, but he did pretty good work. He did good work in the J20, the junior league, the National. So that he was getting promoted. With him, it's speed and finesse. I mean, this guy is.
Ask you a question. There's a lot of spots that I've saw that this guy could be one of the best, if not the best, skaters in this draft. And you know, I was just wondering how's that compared to everybody else ahead of him? I mean, if they're really saying that, why was he taken so late, do you think?
He could be like this. So I had him ranked at let's see what I had. I had him at 105, and you took him at 120. So, you know, pretty much like around the same area. With him, it's like, you know, he's a finesse player. I mean, the effort's there. I don't want to say like he's like averse to physical player like that. It's just that you get these really good stick handlers who are quick, and there's a lot of perimeter play. So maybe that's what people thought, that they want to see him more engaged, you know, battle more. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, he's not a big guy. He's like, you know, like, what is he, like 5'10", $175.
Yeah.
So that was like my knock on him, was just kind of like consistently attack the middle. Unfortunately, we had a guy like Zach Benson in the draft this year, where he was a smaller guy. He wasn't like very big, and he attacked the middle in a way that I've never seen a winger that big, or that small, if you want to put it that way, attack the middle and do it against great teams. So in a way like that, the bar was set. I don't expect every player, every winger to be like Zach Benson, but you know, you want to see that type of at least attempt to attack the middle. To, if you have plus stick handling skills, you're using it, and your footwork to get into the middle, you're using deception, etc. And he didn't really do that all the time. So, but again, like, it's speed and skill. And he did well against adults. So that's why I ranked him where I ranked him, and the Flyers pretty much took him where I had him.
Good. So we get to the 5th round, and the Flyers took a big strapping defenseman, or another right-hander, Carter Sutherland. And this was a little bit more of a controversial pick in the eyes of some. What say you?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't call it controversial. I mean, people could be, what's the controversy? He's a project defenseman. I mean, it's a 5th round pick. I had him at 111. He went 135. He was on I guess it wasn't really the top pairing. It was like the middle pairing with Cagnoni. Cagnoni's a smaller offensive-minded guy, power play quarterback, big shooter. So Sutherland, his job was to be kind of like the safety net. He takes a lot of risks. There's a raw, I guess, a feel about him sometimes, the way he makes decisions. You're like, oh, all right, take it easy a little bit there. But he could be physical. He's got a long reach. So I don't, you know, he's a defenseman that is still like green. Like, he's a guy that he's an unfinished product. There's no rule that says a defenseman that you draft in the 3rd or 4th or 5th, even the 2nd round, needs to show up right away and be ready for Lehigh Valley or be ready for the NHL. Now, we all know defensemen take a while. Emil Andrea, when he was drafted, I had him as a 1st round pick. I was very high on him. I thought he was this on-ice general and etc. And in between, you know, people are knocking him about his skating and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I think kid's a pro. I think he could be a top 4 guy, at least at worst at Lehigh Valley. And so, again, you just have to be patient. So I can understand if people wanted something else. But by that point,
I think that was it. Yeah.
By that point, they already taken 2 goalies. So you're not going to take another goalie. They already got the franchise guy in Michkov. They got one of the top 5 right D in the draft. So, and then they went out and they got the center. They got a good center in Knubel. So they swung high for Chernik. So what exactly are people really like looking for? Like, I would have, you know, based on my rankings, he would have been maybe a best player available. I got to see who else was on the board. I mean, because I haven't really looked at it yet. But yeah, when I saw the pick, I'm like, all right, that's where he was expected to go. He's a big project defenseman who could skate okay. He can handle the puck. He just needs to become, I guess, more like confident in himself. And we haven't really seen him run his own pairing because Cagnoni did all the puck handling and shooting.
Gotcha. The controversy really should have qualified that and say among the pundit class. Dan, you got a time situation here. I wanted to break in and recognize that.
Oh yeah, I still got a little bit of time. Yeah, the thing about Southern, which I thought was interesting, was I think he's a Flyers fan. Like I think growing up, he was a Flyers fan. There was something in his post-draft interview that kind of pointed that out. And then the couple Flyers fans were sort of making comments because in his elite prospects profile, the NHL comparable was Travis Sanheim, which of course Flyers fans have some strong negative feelings towards Sanheim at the moment. But I saw a few clips where Southern just stood up someone at the blue line with big body checks. So again, as Steve said, we're talking late round NHL picks. You know, if these guys work out, it's great. If not, it's not really expected that they work out. But it seemed like a fine pick to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you get AHL depth defenseman out of a fifth rounder, you're doing pretty well. Real honestly.
Yeah, and again, like he was I think he was a fairly high Bantam pick. Maybe he was like a second or third round, if I recall. So, like again, like you haven't. Portland's going to graduate some guys. He's going to be able to take on a bigger role. You know, it's just like the NHL. Like you're not going to just hand a job to a kid who is a high pick or promising pick. He's going to have to earn it, and the veterans don't want to just give up and say, "Oh yeah, take my job, go ahead." Oh, I don't care about not getting drafted. You go ahead. I want you to get drafted. That rarely happens, if it happens at all. So as far as the Sanheim comparisons, I mean, Sanheim in his draft year was freaking dominant. So like, you know, like we're comparing him to what he is now. Like when you watch him now, you're like, oh yeah, Travis Sanheim. Like, no, I mean, he's a you know, a upright, mobile, you know, defense first type, but I think there's room for growth on the offensive side. So I'm not, again, you just take it for what it is. He's a late round defense prospect. You needed help to fill those ranks, and he's a pretty good option.
Sure. In the sixth round, 172 overall, Ryan McPherson from Penticton in the BCHL. He's going to the NCAA, I believe.
Yeah, UNH. So yeah. The funny thing about McPherson was that he played for Leamington, I think they're called. It's in the Go JHL, the Greater Ontario Junior League there, and so it's still NCAA commitment caliber. A lot of kids have gone from there. They've changed and their minds have gone to the OHL. So it's a pretty competitive league. And he has a twin brother. I forgot his twin brother's name. I think it was Colin, maybe. So Colin and Ryan McPherson, they were like the dominant twins of the league. They dominated the postseason. They were like 1-2 in scoring.
Connor, actually.
Connor. Is it Connor McPherson?
Yeah, it's Connor.
Okay,
yeah,
Connor, yeah. Colin. Okay, he's Irish. I can tell you that much. So anyway.
His eyes are smiling. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this tandem were so unstoppable in this league. And Connor was like the flashy, offensive-minded type, whereas Ryan was the shutdown, 200-foot, key face-off, physical, like, I'm going to say like almost like more complete, while the other brother was more dynamic. So they're both going to move over to Penticton to play in the BCHL. Then they're going to both move on to UNH. And I saw that the Flyers invited Connor to camp. So the brothers will be together. If you put a gun to my head, I would have taken the offensive-minded guy. Because not that Ryan can't score. He can. He's got a good shot. He was a one-timer option on the power play. But I would have maybe gone with Connor, but I could see why they went for the, defensively responsible. And he led the playoffs in scoring. So he could score as well. So we'll see. But yeah, those two did a lot of damage in that league. And so I didn't have them ranked. I think I had Connor ranked and no, maybe I didn't. But yeah, it's again, I said this, I think I said this in my write-up on the blog, that the Flyers, when they draft late round forwards, you have to take notice because, you want to go back to, look at McLaughlin and what he did. Look at, what's his name? The French kid.
Elliot Desnoyers.
Desnoyers. Well, either the other guy, Gendron, and I'm forgetting somebody else.
Oh, that's the Lindblom,
Cates. Cates.
Yeah, Noah Cates. Yep.
Yeah, like if the Flyers draft, and I still think that they were premature in getting rid of Connor McLennan, but that's another story for.
Oh, I hope we didn't lose him there.
I hope not either.
Yeah.
Looks like Steve dropped out there for a sec. I was gonna. Oh, he's back.
We got you.
Yeah.
You're talking about McLennan.
Yeah. So anyway, when the Flyers drafted McPherson, I was like, you know what? I'm going to trust their scouts, and I'm going to trust them that they are willing to wait for this guy. And so whether he goes from the BCHL to the USHL, or he stays in the BCHL and goes right into college, these guys usually find a way to put up points. They score. They're among the top scorers in their teams. And again, another reason why I like to Flyers drafts every year is because they take these types of swings in the later rounds to kids that could score. They could have 200-foot acumen. They could be penalty killers, good on faceoffs. Fine. They could have size. Great. But they always seem to go for these guys with high-end skill amongst their peers, and it pays off, or it's been paying off. So yeah, I'm not doubting them. I love the pick.
Yeah, I mean, actually, in this particular case, the scout out there, the Ontario scout, thought that this particular kid compared a little bit to Noah Cates. He saw some of those qualities in him. So
yeah, he's a competitive kid. He's good at both ends of the rink.
Yeah,
I'm happy if the Flyers are taking players like that haven't played in a major junior league or college in the 6th round, as opposed to taking Jay O'Brien, who hadn't played in those leagues, in the 1st round. So let's take those chances in the 6th round.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Did they decide? Did they make the decision? Is it official that 2nd round pick for next year's draft?
Yeah, they are not. They're not going to be signing Jay O'Brien. So yeah, it looks like they're going to get a 2nd round pick in next year's draft.
Yeah, that'll convey.
All right, so that's going to be 51, or something like that. Whatever.
Yeah, it's going to be like the 19th or 20th pick.
Yeah,
in the 2nd round. So right now they have 2 1st round picks for next year and 2 2nd round picks.
Yeah, and because they used that other pick, the Provorov pick they got from LA.
Yep. Correct.
To get Bjarnason, really.
It's hard to imagine that between now and the draft they won't have moved someone like a Lawton or a Hart or a Konechny to pick up another 1st round pick or 2. So
yeah, there's a lot there. So we're going to come to your favorite pick, the 7th round, number 199, the towering Matteo Man. Tell us all about it.
All right, so he's not bad. Okay, I definitely did not rank him this year with his size and his hands, because he's got soft hands, he's got good size, and his short distance quickness for his size isn't that bad. I felt like he should have been like I should take over these games, and not take over from an offensive standpoint. I mean, like from the time that he's standing up at his line to the time that he backs down to the circles in the corners. Now, I was high on him, high-ish on him. I had him out like a 150 range. I always viewed him as a project. And then at the top prospects game, he got obliterated by smaller guys. And I was wondering if this is going to impact him, with Chicoutimi in the Quebec League in the 2nd half. And I noticed that he was a little timid, more timid than I was expecting. So I'm not going to call him soft, because he's not. I think his dad is the Ottawa Senators assistant GM. So, he's got like familiarity with the game. But again, like much like the other defense prospects we talked about, like the Flyers needed to add bodies to the right side. So I think he's a righty, if I remember correctly. So the fact that he's like like one of the last picks of the draft, what was like the 7th round pick, I'm not going to make a big deal about it. Okay, again, he just wasn't my guy, but he fills a need, and I like the fact that he's the kind of guy, because of his size, he might push a new prospect like Granz, because Granz too, he was heralded once considered a potential 1st round pick, still went early in the 2nd round, and we're still waiting on him to maybe reach his potential, or at least come close to it. Not having a guy like Mann around, that might push him a little bit more. So I can definitely see Mann being a bottom pairing shutdown guy, like penalty kill, crease clearer, etc. he could be mean. I want to see him be mean more often. That was really my only knock on him.
Okay. At that point in the draft, you're just taking a swing, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
you can never discount the last person in the draft. Who was it? And in baseball, the one thing that pops in my mind was what do you call it? Mike Piazza. Piazza was the last guy, so you can never discount, especially somebody that's hungry and wants to play well. You know.
Yeah, he was pretty he was notable heading into the season. Man was, and like I said, he was at the top prospects game, so you know what I mean. So again, I think getting a guy like that in round 7, usually it's going to take longer for them to kind of get it. But listen, once they made that pick, it took me. I didn't have time, but once I finally looked and I went through the Flyers' entire draft, I'm like, they did exactly what you should have wanted them to do, that they addressed needs. They took BPA types. They took home run swings. You can't take a home run swing with every single pick when you're a rebuilding team because you need to replenish the players you lost or graduated. So if you're going to maintain a good farm system or a pipeline, you got to fill it in with guys that are going to be safe, guys that at worst, a guy like Mann could be like a guy that just gives people a tough time in practice and could hold down the checking defensive zone options, let's say, in games, and not like, you're not going to have him run a power play. So, I'm not just saying this because I'm on a Flyers podcast. Like, again, every freaking year, these guys do it. They draft kids that I like. They, if you look at the ranges, Bonk was in the range. Bjarnason was kind of in the range. The only guy was Barkey, and I admit that I was bullish on him. But Knubel, Chernik, Southern, they were all in my range. So it's a really good draft for them.
Well, I mean, and obviously the big catch is the most important one. But even without that, it sounds like they did pretty much what they should be doing. So.
Yeah. And so I've got to get out of here pretty quickly, but a couple things I just wanted to mention. First, it's just so much fun when Steve joins the show. Thanks, Steve, for.
Oh, no, likewise, guys. Thank you
for your opinion. It's just great having you on. One last thing on the draft is I have noticed, it seems like Briere as GM now, they're when Hextall was here in terms of drafting centers, they were mainly trying to draft 200-foot two-way types of centers. Morgan Frost was really one of the only exceptions. Feels like with Briere here, they're going to be taking more swings at some smaller types of centers or forwards. When you look at Michkov and at Barkey and at Chernik. And then on the defense side, it really looked, they only took right-handed defensemen in the draft, and they only took bigger ones. So it sure seems like that's going to be something they're looking at. Down the left side, probably because down the left side, they've got York and Emile Andre, who project as maybe the top 2 left-handed defensemen in the system right now, and they're both a little bit smaller. I know you guys are going to maybe talk a little bit about the free agents. Overall, it's not going to bother me basically what these guys do. I saw that people were complaining about Hathaway and about Mark Stahl. They're 1 and 2 year deals with guys that are not going to be here when this team is ready to compete. They need veterans here who can provide some guidance to the younger guys. I don't think they're going to let them block guys who are ready to compete in the NHL. So I just don't have the energy or the wherewithal to complain about these guys. And I think Hathaway in particular, it was a pretty good signing as someone that's going to help these guys out. So in any event, have fun here the rest of the show. I got to jump off, but thanks again, Steve.
All right, Dan, likewise. Great insight from you too.
Great seeing you, Dan. So, before I get into any of that, I just want to ask you about a Flyers prospect from a couple of years ago, Samu Tuomala. Seemed to find his level. Now, if I mispronounce this, is it the Mestis League?
Yeah.
Which is below the Finnish elite.
It's like their AHL. AHL. Yeah.
So he finally, he said, look, this guy's all offense, lots of speed. But he's had trouble kind of getting to that Finnish elite league. But where would you rank the elite league in Finland relative to the AHL, KHL, NHL
I mean, no, the Finnish Elite League, the SM Liga, has done a really good job, turning players, developing, if you want to call it that, NHL players. And when players come from the SM Liga, at a minimum, they're AHL ready. So maybe you might get like your typical first year jitters, new culture, new surroundings. Okay, that's natural. So imagine us going to freaking Finland for a new job. And okay, you're not just, all right, I'm ready. You have to, it takes a while to get acclimated. Remember also, a smaller sheet. So I like the SHL, the KHL, the Finnish league, the Czech league. They're all unique and different. The Czech league is more like physical. The KHL is more tightly checking, focuses on goaltending. The Swedish league has smaller players, and the Finnish league is kind of like, it seems like they're more willing to play prospects, young kids. It seems like it's a younger league. They don't have, like in the Finnish league and the Swedish league, it seems like, and I could be just talking out of my ass, but it just seems like there are older veteran types in the SHL than in Finland, and maybe because they pay more money, who knows? But as far as like the quality competition goes, with Tuomala, he belonged to Karpat, and Karpat is always every year a really good team. Sebastian Aho was there. Jesse Puljujärvi was on that team too. So year by year, they're always competitive. They're known as a defensive-oriented team with good goalies. And last year was terrible. So when Tuomala went up there, I didn't really watch him like extensively, but he wasn't producing. So I'm like, oh, maybe he's just not ready. And remember, he's a smaller guy. He's like thin and wiry and whatever. And so he goes down to the Mestis, and he's one of the best players in the league. You know what I mean? And so I think considering he was just drafted in 2021, that within 2 years, he was already one of the best players in the second division there, then you could say that A, he's ready for the SM Liga in a full-time role, or B, he's ready for the AHL. And the Flyers, if they want to bring him over, they could bring him over. But it might be an issue with numbers and how many contracts they already have, etc. So the bottom line with Tuomala was he was doubted. People were concerned about his development, and he bounces back with a fantastic season. And I think his team went all the way to the finals too, and they lost in but he was consistently one of the top goal scorers in the game, in the league.
Yeah, in 29 games, he had 26 goals, 20 apples, and in the playoffs, he went 7-12 for 19 points in 17 games.
Yeah,
for Katera.
He had a great year. He was definitely like MVP caliber this year in that league. It's just a matter of how much stock you put into that kind of production. If you follow, again, whether he did this in he was a second round pick. I had him as a first round pick. I was not expecting him to not be with Karpat full time by his draft +2, but this next season is going to be more telling than anything else. So, because he's dominated the lesser league, he's done with junior, he's done with the Mestis. Now, let's see what we get out of him in the SM Liga. And but again, like the Flyers have these wingers all over the place. It's crazy. They're going to have to make tough decisions. They already made it with McLennan. I think they also didn't retain somebody else. Was it Wisdom or no? He's still around.
Wisdom's still around, but he was demoted to the ECHL.
Okay. Yeah, so remember that they moved on from Matt Strome,
Ratcliffe,
Susko, and them. So the play development guys in Philly, they're willing to cut the cord when they know it's time. But we're not there yet with Tuomala. I mean, he literally just had the best season of his career, this year. So.
Yeah, and he was just flashing some pretty good speed to development camp today. So it's not a shock there. So, I mean, I wanted to ask you, do you know a lot about one of the camp invitees? It kind of tugs the heartstrings of Flyers fans. Alex Tertishny, his father, Dimitri, played for the Flyers in 98, 99, and it was in a terrible boating accident after a pretty promising rookie year. And they invite his son, Alex, to camp, and just thought I'd run that by you.
No. I couldn't even tell you what league he plays for, but I remember Tatishny with the Flyers though. Vaguely. The name sounds familiar, but
Yeah.
I wish I
was,
can't help you there. I
no,
can't help
it's
you there.
okay.
I'm
I
sorry.
forgot to run it by you because your recall of some of these guys is amazing. Yeah. So the Flyers, what's your the Flyers pick up Ryan Poehling, 1 year deal, Garnet Hathaway 2-year deal, Mark Stahl another 1 year deal. All of these are movable, and all these are kind of like you were talking about earlier about talking about blocking kids and all, but you're rebuilding.
Yeah.
You were saying, what's your general feeling when you see teams that are going through what the Flyers are going through? How do you apply that ethos?
Well, they're clearly bringing a type. They have to bring in guys that either can play for a guy like Tortorella because they have already, or they know the type, and they don't mind a, let's say, tougher. And who knows how tough it is even now compared to what Torch was, let's say, 5-10 years ago. Yeah. But at the same, just like what Chicago's doing with Bedard, you have to add veterans. Detroit did it a couple of years ago when they had their 20 something win season. You have to do it. And, unfortunately, as fans, we think we'll just go out and get everybody who's young and could score and they're cheap. Well, no, duh. Every team wanted to do the same thing. So it's very clear to me that when you trade Ivan Provorov and you trade Kevin Hayes, you are rebuilding. It is a rebuild. So it does not matter whom you sign. If the Flyers do things the way that most rebuilding teams do it, they're going to have 60 guys or 50 guys appear in at least one NHL game this year. I mean, look at San Jose and these other teams where you just have guys coming left and right. The guys that show up, no one's going to block them. No one's going to block them, quote unquote, where if a guy's ripping up the AHL, they're going to tell a guy like Hathaway or Stahl, who's 40 years old almost, and say, hey, Mark, take a couple of days off, okay? We got this kid coming up. We want to give him a shot. Hey, Stahl's be like, hey, no problem. I'll take a day off. I get paid for it, fine. So there's not going to be any blocking. I don't agree with that at all. If they decide to extend these guys and give them long-term deals, and now your whole team for 27, 28 has Hathaways and Stalls and veteran UFAs. All right, I thought we were rebuilding over here, but that I wouldn't be concerned about that. I think it could be. I don't think it's going to be a bad season. I think you'll see a slight improvement from last year, where Torch is going to get the most out of the young group. The kids who are young and hungry will push the veterans to work harder. The veterans will push the younger kids to be better themselves. If you get good goaltending, it's going to, manifest into, reputation around the league where they know the Flyers are tough to play against. We saw that change last year. So as much as I think as a fan, you want your team to tank and get the high pick, great. I don't think Torch is going to really allow that to happen. And I think the guys that they brought in are exactly the kinds of players that he would want. I want guys who are going to work hard and set the right example for the kids. I don't think anyone's going to get blocked.
No. Yeah, Chef.
Well, I was just going to say, at some point, people are so worried about the kids getting blocked, but they also have to remember the kids still got to play, though. They got to earn that spot. And I think that just because you have a talented prospect, it just doesn't mean go, okay, here's the keys to the car, go drive a Ferrari. No, you got to get your license first. You got to do some time in the car. It's a lot of other things involved in it. You just don't give them the keys to the kingdom and expect them to, because in reality, you're just setting up for failure because you're not giving them the support system and the nurturing. Because, like I said, you can never underestimate the power of a rah-rah guy in your locker room, a leader, somebody who could sit there and set an example for the younger kids.
Yeah, and on top of that, 100% right. And the other thing is that they played kids last year. They promoted a bunch of kids. They played them. Even when the team was improving from the year before, you would think that, 2 years ago would have been the time during Vigneault's final days. That's what, let's just play all the kids. They're clearly not, let's say, averse to promoting kids and playing them if they earn it. And like you said, Chef, if they earn it, they earn it. They're not going to go anywhere. So
Cates and Tippett.
Yeah, Frost. They are not going back to Lehigh Valley. They're set. And so, all right, yeah, it took, they're in their like early 20s. Okay, they're not 19 when they made it. But I still think that, you look at the way that the roster is constructed, you look at the strategy moving forward. The team has been very open about rebuilding. Their actions said that they're rebuilding. I don't think you will see, my advice to Flyers fans who are worried about players being blocked is you're going to see pretty much every kid except for like the Russian kids play. Like if they're on the contract, if they're losing or they're out of the playoff race by, let's say, the trade deadline, these kids will play and they'll get a longer look or more of an audition than most other franchises. Because most other franchises are like, hey, we're on the verge of making the playoffs. Can't afford to play you more than a couple of games. Or if we do, it'll be on the fourth line. I don't think that's going to be the case with the Flyers. They're going to have lengthy auditions for all these kids.
Yep. Yeah, makes sense. Steve, I don't know what else to say, man. I just really appreciate you coming by. And so you got to tell the people what's next for you and what projects you're working on now that the draft has been completed.
Well, the draft might be over. It's not over for me. I know people like to do report cards right off the bat. I understand why they do it. I can't do that. For me to analyze a draft, it takes like anywhere from 7 to 10 days post-draft because I have to go analyze every single pick. I have to analyze what the GMs and scouting directors said before the draft, what they said after the draft. Were they true to their word? Did they draft for need? Did they draft did they go BPA? Did they improve positions that were positions of need? Was there controversy? Like for example, the Montreal GM comes out and says, we don't see Ryan Bacher being a number one or a power play quarterback. After they pass on Michkov for me, like, all right, gee, thanks. So I got to dig to the bottom of that. So what I got going on right now on my Substack is I'm recapping every single pick from 1 all the way down to 224. And I'm trying to figure out, so I give you a summary of the player and I give you my thoughts on it underneath. So once that's done, then I get to go and watch all the interviews and then I get to do my report cards. So once I do that, it's going to be the pick by pick recap is going to be complete, report cards complete. Then I'll do a podcast to wrap it all up. And then that's it, on to 2024.
Excellent. And you can be found at thedraftanalyst.substack.com.
Absolutely. And on Twitter at the Draft Analyst. And, just busy. I'll take maybe like a couple of weeks off in July. But after that, August, we have the Ivan Holinka. That's the first major draft event of the year. So actually, we have the WJSS coming up, the Summer Showcase. I think it's in Plymouth. There should be some Flyers prospects there playing for either Sweden, Finland, or the U.S. or Canada. So, yeah. A lot of stuff.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it. Steve, thanks again.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, hope to see you again soon.
All right, guys. Take care. Thank you.
All right. Take care. All right. Well, Chef, we still got some unfinished business, don't we?
Yeah, I guess so. Everything worked out great. I mean, we got some great info. He always does a very thorough job, and we appreciate it. And it's awesome. Like I said, I'm still waiting for the season to start. I want it to start even faster now. I know that we always say that time flies, but I guess it can't fly fast enough now.
Yeah. No, I hear you. They're just a little bit. Alex Tretichny he was born in 2000, and I think he was with Stonehill College. He's 23, so it's a nice story. There's always a possibility he could be a late blooming pro. His chances of making the NHL are probably not that great, but I have fond memories of his father. It was really a sad day back in '99. I was in training, and it was pretty intense. I had just been promoted down here in Florida, and we took a break, went out, as a group to eat, and I saw the Sports Center update about the accident. And my manager was looking at me, and I'm like, well, what's wrong? You look really sad. And I'm like, yeah, one of the players from the Flyers just got killed in an accident. It's just unbelievable. So he had a lot of promise.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about these players that they acquired and what they bring to the lineup. And you got to watch Danny Sneaky. He's sneaky. He said, well, I don't think we're really going to do much with free agency. Yeah. And you had to know they had Mark Stahl today. And look, it's a $1.1 million contract. And I just had the information in front of me. But and it's, 1 year. Same thing. Ryan Paling, he's 24. So he's the same draft year, I believe, as Morgan Frost, right? So he's a pretty good skating guy with size, defensive. The player got off to a big start. He had a hat trick in his first game or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, maybe.
With Montreal. But the biggest add in terms of, the length of the contract is still only 2 years. Garnet Hathaway, always a thorn in the side of the Flyers when he played for the Capitals. So, yeah, he's a winger. He can play the PK, right wing or left wing. He's 31. He's making 2.375. Again, movable contract. Because if you pick him up around the trade deadline, I'm not saying I want to throw him out. We haven't seen him play yet. But we know what we're going to get from him. But he actually produces decent numbers.
Yes.
You think about it, in what is it, some 74 games or something like that. Or the 84 actually, because he played for both Washington and the Bruins. But he had 13 goals, 9 assists. In combination, it's not bad for that kind of player, a fourth line player who had some toughness. And he'll be like, give you those little, like Matt Tkachuk. He's not like Matt Tkachuk in terms of his skill. He'll give you his little punches in the chin, like after the whistle. And
Yeah. No, I mean, if you look down the list of the guys they picked up, there's one thing is they're workers. They're hard. They're not slouchers. They put in a full shift when they go out. So it's not you. And I think that's, he might not have gone out there and got the highest skilled guys, but he got Danny Briere is pretty smart. Like you said, he's slick. He brought out some guys that are skilled workers and how he wants his kids to emulate. He's not going to bring somebody in here that's going to take a shift off. That's not going to happen under Torts' watch. So he brought in a type of player that he wants. They want the team. I guess Torts. The three-headed monster. All three of them are going to sit there and go, "This is who we want you to emulate." Like each type of player, and that's where they'll go from there.
Yeah. And just looking at it from league wide. Before I get in it, I do think that Tanner Laczynski and Wade Allison are guys. When you're 26, I don't think you're blocked. You either had a lot of injuries, you haven't really developed, you have had some tough breaks. This is why these guys are kind of like on their last legs with the organization. And I believe that one of them is probably not going to make it out of training camp, or maybe even to training camp. We'll see. I do think this roster is not complete. But that being said, I don't expect any major moves to be made from here on out. I don't expect there to be a Sanheim trade. We were told there wouldn't be, right?
Right.
I don't think that any of the other moves like Lawton or Konechny or Carter Hart, we're still waiting for some kind of announcement with the Canada thing from the 2018. I don't think anything's going to happen. I think they're going to let them go to camp. They could make another trade.
So what I'm thinking is they're pretty much done for now. Everything you just brought up. Like, I don't think Tanner Laczynski makes it. I don't think he makes it even onto the team. So we'll see. But Wade Allison, it might, because he kind of picked up a little bit at the end of last year. And does he have value? I don't know. He didn't stop working hard. And as much as he's got a little bit of skill, but as much as he was hurt, he never gave up. And I think Torts is the kind of person to see that he doesn't give up. So I think if you're talking about those two, I think that Allison survives faster than Tanner Laczynski. But the other things, they're all trade deadline moves to me, if that's what you're talking about, because obviously we want the best return, and the best value for these guys are going to be at the trade deadline when some teams are a little bit more desperate to, whether on the edge or they want of making the playoffs, or they want to improve to get that to go to the next level, and go deep in the rounds in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing that something popped into my mind, I have no idea whether this is really possible, but if it is indeed true that Fedotov could find his way here, that's a big story.
Yes. That's a huge.
I wouldn't even want to put a percentage on that. But to me, that would be like the next big thing if it did happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to go to CSKA. I think they're going to leverage Fedotov to some degree, or maybe they are leveraging. I think that's something Dan was alluding to with regard to Michkov. We'll see. Look at it through that lens. Yeah. So, the only other thing I wanted to just cover real briefly. Now, as we're recording this, John Gibson has requested a trade out of Anaheim. That's an important goalie. There's enough teams that need goalies. Hellebuck situation, Winnipeg, is not settled yet. And then some of the other unsigned UFAs of note, Patrick Kane, Matt Dumba, Vlad Tarasenko, Patrice Bergeron. I still think he's probably going to retire. Thomas Tatar, Maxime Comtois. All right, now we're coming down a little bit. Jonathan Toews. I think he still wants to play, but I'm not sure. Oscar Sundqvist. He was a pretty good player for St. Louis, I believe, in their 19 Cup run. And Denis Gurianov, a guy who never really quite hit his ceiling for Dallas. There's been a lot of activity over the last week. It's very strange to have the draft and the free agency so close together. That's still, I guess, a product of the pandemic effects and scrunching the schedule up, I guess. What before we go, what the hell is Steve Yzerman doing? They call it the Yzer plan. I mean, what's he doing?
I don't understand it, and I have two friends that are big Detroit fans, and they're like, they're trusting Yzerman, like, but I look at it, I'm like, yeah, you're trusting Yzerman, but he's just you're getting the same results as what we got with Fletcher, so I don't know. Well, okay, it's still a little bit early, but look, at some point you got to start winning, you got to start producing a winner. I like Yzerman. I thought he did an okay job, and I think I mentioned it on the other show, but he hasn't won anything yet. Until you won something, you don't have that pedigree. You won it as a player, but not as a GM or an executive yet. So I still think he's got a lot to show.
It wasn't even like a Dale Talon situation. I mean, he really did set them up and more or less organize the whole, the whole club internally. So I give him a lot of credit for what happened at Tampa. But when he's taking his show to Detroit, I mean, it's just to let people in on what I'm talking about. 1 year, $4 million for Ghost. Okay, but there's no defense there. Okay, he's good at zone denials, but okay. JT Comfort, 5 years, $25.5 million. I guess people say, well, if you go through the analytical models, and he's not. You know what it is? It's like they can't get the player they really need. They waived Phil Zadina. He didn't work out. I don't know if that was Zadina's from his regime or that was still left over from Ken Holland. But Svechnikov, they talked about not having a lot of draft luck because there is some luck involved. But JT Comfort, I don't get that. Daniel Sprong, 1 year, $2 million. Okay, all offense. Alex Lyon had that one little run with the Florida Panthers, but that's, they don't really have a goalie yet, do they?
Not really.
They went after Nedeljkovic more or less almost mockingly when Carolina let him go. But I guess Carolina, their scouts are really good. And I think that was before Tulsky got there, but I think they're putting everything in Ville Husso. I don't know. They signed James Reimer. Great guy, nice guy. They're in love with Matt Luff. They signed Keller Yamamoto, Klim Kostin. I think Yamamoto.
Did he go to Seattle?
Yeah, I think they let him go.
No, yeah, he went to Seattle. Yeah.
And they took a dump for future considerations from Edmonton, and then they signed Klim Kostin, one of those guys, looks like Tarzan, usually plays like Jane, hasn't really followed through, So the only reason I point this out on the Flyers podcast is because of what you said in terms of we want to be critical of the last couple of general managers here, but even a guy like Pedigree, like Yzerman, Hall of Famer, and basically set the table and had Tampa Bay go into the finals, set them up to go to the finals multiple times, including once when he was there, I think in 2015. So I don't know. Let's have a little faith in Danny. He's the last thing. Left thing. Tony DeAngelo. the trade, according to Don Waddell, not Danny Briere, who was reticent when asked about it, but Don Waddell confirmed that the trade will go through. And if you recall, for those listening, because a year has to go by between transactions between the same club with the same player, especially with salary retained, that's why this thing got hung up. But he's definitely going. The Flyers are going to get a very, like a B or C level prospect. Nobody really great. It's basically a salary dump, and the Flyers will have to retain about 50% the salary, $2.5 million. So that's 2 retained salaries this year between TDA and Kevin Hayes. So, Chef, any final thoughts?
No, I don't have. I think we've covered everything. If you feel like you didn't like anything, just feel free to reach out to any one of us on here. I mean, we're more than welcome to engage you on it. You can reach me at Chef to the Left B on Twitter. That's Chef, the number 2 to the left B, and we will gladly dispute and argue and just have good old fun talking Flyers hockey.
Got it. And you can follow Dan Silver, the great Dan Silver, at DSilver88. DSilver88. You can follow me, Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Isaiah, don't forget the _520. And of course, the O&B Puckcast on Twitter, as long as the rate limiter doesn't stop us, at O&B Puck. So we're going to take a little time off here, about 10 days at least, unless something big happens. Until next time, everybody, take care.